In the picturesque town nestled among the stunning mountains of Preston County, West Virginia, with a population of approximately 1,500 residents, Terra Alta stands as a testament to natural beauty and a rich historical legacy. The town's charm and welcoming community spirit have long been celebrated by its inhabitants. However, it was within this idyllic setting that a tragic incident unfolded on August 22, 1972, claiming the life of a 13-year-old boy named Jeremiah Matthew Watkins. Jeremiah, lovingly known as Jerry to his parents, James Edward Watkins and Enid Nicola, was born in a Morgantown home in Monongalia County, West Virginia. Unfortunately, his family's dreams of a happy and complete life were shattered when James passed away in 1976, just 4 years after Jeremiah's birth. Despite this profound loss, Enid displayed remarkable resilience and dedicated herself entirely to raising her son, hoping for a fresh start in life. Overcoming numerous obstacles, Enid made the decision to move to Terra Alta, determined to provide Jeremiah with the best possible life. Jeremiah, for his part, was content with life's simple pleasures. As he grew, his adventurous spirit became increasingly evident, as he could often be seen riding his bicycle through the hills of Terra Alta while singing along to the tunes of old-time rock and roll. It remains uncertain whether Enid ever remarried, but in the mid-1980s, she welcomed a daughter named Jamie Jeremiah into their lives. Jeremiah cherished his baby sister immensely and cherished every moment spent with her. He would play with her for hours, bringing laughter to her little world. Despite his gentle and patient nature with his younger sibling, Jeremiah eagerly awaited the day when Jamie would take her first steps, sharing candy and tender moments with her. The last time Jeremiah laid eyes on his beloved sister was in 1985, when he was 13 years old, and Jamie was approximately a year old. While the exact date is unclear, it was in early November of that year when Jeremiah left home to explore the town, but tragically never returned. When Enid could not locate her son anywhere in Terra Alta, she reported him missing. This marked the beginning of a distressing period, not just for Jeremiah's family, but for the entire state of West Virginia, as it coincided with a devastating flood that swept through the region. The flood, one of the deadliest natural disasters in West Virginia's history, claimed 47 lives, injured countless others, and caused extensive property damage totaling an estimated $580 million. Amid the chaos and destruction, the search for Jeremiah was severely hampered by the floodwaters. Despite the relentless efforts of law enforcement, the 13-year-old boy remained missing, and Enid clung to hope for his safe return. However, that hope was shattered on November 2, 1985, when officers stumbled upon a shallow grave along the railroad tracks in Terra Alta. Upon closer examination, they made a gruesome discovery. Jeremiah's lifeless body lay in the shallow grave. Initially, it appeared as though he had fallen victim to the devastating flood. However, a closer inspection revealed a stab wound on Jeremiah's body, suggesting a more sinister and violent end. The investigation swiftly transitioned into a homicide inquiry as law enforcement scoured the area for clues. Unfortunately, luck did not favor the investigators, as the flood had washed away potential evidence, leaving them with more questions than answers. An autopsy revealed that Jeremiah had suffered a brain bleed from blunt force trauma to his head, but the fatal blow had come from the stab wound in his back. The loss of Jeremiah devastated his family, who grieved in silence while hoping for justice to be served. The Terra Alta detectives worked tirelessly, interviewing numerous individuals and pursuing every lead, but their efforts yielded no suspects or arrests. As time passed, the case grew cold, and Enid, frustrated by the lack of progress, attempted to move forward with her life as Jamie grew older. Nevertheless, the questions surrounding her brother's death continued to haunt her. In the early 2000s, while attending college, Jamie made the courageous decision to reach out to authorities in an attempt to uncover the truth about her brother's murder. Regrettably, her efforts were met with discouragement, as many believed that finding the culprit after so many years was unlikely. In February 2023, Captain Tian Ticknell of the Preston County Sheriff's Office took it upon himself to revisit the decades-old unsolved murder case of Jeremiah. He delved deep into the case, meticulously reviewing old files, interviews, and witness statements. During this thorough examination, Captain Tishnell stumbled upon an interview with a young man named David Monroe Adams. Adams, who was only 18 years old at the time of Jeremiah's murder and a resident of Terra Alta, had provided a statement with inconsistencies, prompting further investigation. Authorities have not disclosed the specific inconsistencies that caught Captain Tishnell's attention, but they soon located David Adams, who was living in Westover, West Virginia. After several interviews, Adams initially denied any involvement in Jeremiah's death. However, during one of these interviews, he finally confessed to the murder. Adams revealed that on that fateful day in November 1985, he had engaged in a heated argument with Jeremiah over a stolen bicycle. This disagreement had escalated into a violent confrontation, with Adams striking Jeremiah in the face in a fit of rage. Unable to decide how to proceed, Adams dragged the injured boy to a nearby shed, where he ultimately fatally stabbed him. Afterward, he disposed of Jeremiah's lifeless body in a shallow grave near the train tracks. This confession marked a significant breakthrough in the case and provided a semblance of closure to Jeremiah's family, who had waited for justice for nearly 4 decades. David Adams, now 56 years old, was promptly taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder in connection to Jeremiah Watkins's death. He is currently being held on a $1 million bond in North Central. Upon hearing the news, Enid and Jamie were overwhelmed with a range of emotions. Although questions surrounding the murder still linger, they found solace in the fact that the perpetrator had finally been apprehended and could no longer pose a threat to anyone else. It was a bittersweet moment, one that allowed them to begin healing after years of uncertainty and anguish. In Southern California, a region renowned for its sunny climate, laid-back way of life, and breathtaking natural landscapes, lies a place that bears a captivating blend of cultural influences. This area's identity has been shaped by a diverse mix of elements, ranging from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood to the rich Mexican heritage that permeates its streets. Southern California is also home to some of the world's most iconic attractions, including Disneyland, Universal Studios Hollywood, and the Santa Monica Pier. However, it was within this seemingly idyllic backdrop that a series of gruesome murders commenced on that fateful day of July 25, 1980. At the time, a young resident of Brentwood named Carrie Lenander, a Palisades High School student, and her close friend Tony Garfield, both 15-year-old juniors at Palisades High, decided to embark on a hitchhiking adventure to the corner of Wilshire and Barrington. Little did they know that their lives would soon take a harrowing turn. Their ride that day was provided by a man described only as Ken from Canada, a male Caucasian. Ken drove them first to the Hollywood area, where they stopped for a restroom break. Carrie and Tony had been consuming alcohol before hitchhiking, and as they made their pit stop, Tony began to feel dizzy. She informed Carrie that she needed to return home. Ken complied, driving Tony back to her house. Tragically, this would be the last time Tony saw her friend alive. The events that unfolded leading up to Carrie's murder remain shrouded in mystery. However, the next day, on July 26, 1980, at approximately 4:30 a.m., Carrie's lifeless body was discovered in a street gutter on the 3700 block of Victoria Avenue in South Los Angeles. The only trace of evidence left behind by the perpetrator was white rock material, found in her hair and near her body, which matched the material discovered across from Carrie's residence. This grim discovery hinted at the chilling possibility that her murderer might have been someone who either knew her or had been stalking her in the days leading up to the tragedy. Tony Garfield, however, had no knowledge of the person in question. The autopsy report revealed that Carrie had been assaulted and strangled to death. An unidentified DNA sample, presumably belonging to the perpetrator, was collected from Carrie's body but remained of little use due to the limitations of forensic technology in the 1980s. Detective Tim Marcia, who was assigned to the case, believed that Ken and Carrie had visited her residence, where she changed her clothes before their fateful outing. Yet, The exact circumstances and timeline of the murder remained elusive. Carrie Lenender's parents, Carl J. Lenender III and Joyce Fadden, were understandably devastated by their daughter's tragic death. They were determined to seek justice for Carrie, offering a reward of $50,000, in addition to a $25,000 reward from the LA City Council. Through various news outlets, Carrie's parents spoke fondly of their daughter, who was just 9 days away from her 16th birthday, and pleaded with the public for any information regarding her murder, even though her case received limited media attention. Brief coverage on shows like Lost Lives and 60 Minutes shed some light on her story. Despite a lack of concrete leads, investigators remained resolute in their pursuit of the killer. Interviews were conducted and a suspect was on their radar, but an arrest proved elusive. Over time, the case grew cold, and it wasn't until early 2002 that the LAPD Cold Case Homicide Unit reopened it. Unfortunately, even this effort did not lead to the apprehension of the perpetrator. For the next 2 decades, the case languished in the archives of the Los Angeles Police Department, while Carrie's family grappled with the pain of their loss and the lingering quest for justice. It wasn't until 2022 that the case saw a dramatic development when DNA evidence finally connected a 76-year-old man named Billy Ray Richardson to the crimes. However, the details of how this connection was made after more than 4 decades remain undisclosed. Surprisingly, investigators also linked Richardson to 3 additional murders in Southern California from the 1980s and 1990s. Among these crimes were the killings of 25-year-old Beverly Cruz and 22-year-old Deborah Cruz, whose naked bodies were discovered in an apartment in West Los Angeles. Another victim, 28-year-old Trina Wilson, was found with her throat slashed in Inglewood on December 31, 1995. All 4 murders appeared to be sexually motivated. On July 14, 2022, Billy Ray Richardson was arrested in Fort Worth, Texas, on charges of multiple murders, sexual assault, and burglary. He was subsequently extradited to Los Angeles to face trial and was held in Tarrant County Jail while awaiting legal proceedings. However, a tragic twist unfolded when Richardson was brought to the hospital in a wheelchair and pronounced dead on February 15, 2023. His demise resulted from complications of a cervical spine injury and blunt force trauma, with COVID-19, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and dementia listed as other significant factors contributing to his death. Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman expressed sadness for the victims' families, acknowledging that they would never witness Richardson being held accountable for his heinous crimes. However, the identification of the perpetrator offered some solace, ensuring that he would no longer pose a threat to society. In the end, justice may have been delayed, but it ultimately found its way to the victims and their grieving families, providing closure and a measure of peace.
A young woman who worked at a jewelry store vanished during her lunch break without a trace. Only a few peculiar clues and witnesses were discovered when investigators started to solve this mystery. The detectives were greatly surprised when they learned the truth only a few decades later. In the Australian city of Gold Coast, Linda Reed was born in 1962. She was raised in a devoted household, was a happy, vivacious child, and enjoyed a large social circle in school. Robert is a man Linda met. They started dating, and at age 19 years of age, the young lady wed him. They envisioned building the home of their dreams and raising a sizable, sociable family. Not long after the wedding, the newlyweds got to work on this. To get the house built as soon as possible, they bought a piece of land and started saving a significant portion of their income for construction. The couple opted to live in a trailer in Robert's parents' backyard rather than pay rent. Linda obtained employment as a salesperson at a jewelry store, and she took a job at a big shopping mall and liked it right away. She connected with the team, and the decent pay helped her save for her dream house even more quickly. Due to the impending holidays, December 1983 was tense because there was a frenzy in the shops. Linda, who was 21 at the time, had to work harder than usual. There was no exception on December 13th. Linda worked hard from the start of her shift and didn't get a chance to take a break until 12 o'clock. She typically ate lunch in the same, but on that particular day, it didn't happen. Instead, They went to the mall and came back earlier than expected. Linda had never been late before the workday started, so her coworkers were very taken aback when she still did not arrive after her break at the scheduled time. It appeared as though she had simply made the decision to leave her ship. The young woman approached her job with the utmost responsibility, so her coworkers didn't think she could do it without telling them. When Linda did not arrive home after her shift, he was also taken aback. After some time passed, he got in touch with her coworkers. When they informed him that his wife had not returned from her break, Robert's level of worry increased significantly. He went to the mall and began exploring the area, looking for Linda. The young woman frequented a number of additional locations, which he went to later, but he was unable to locate her. He was getting more and more worried that something bad had happened with each minute that went by. That evening at 7 p.m., the man made the decision to call the police because of what had happened to Linda. He was informed by the operator that a report of an adult missing would only be taken into consideration after 24 hours had passed. The mother of Linda also made contact with them but got the same response. The report was eventually accepted, but the relatives had to wait until the following day. When Linda took her break, the police started an investigation to find out what she was doing. The young lady had gone shopping for New Year's Eve. They discovered several stores are housed in the same structure. She then went to her bank branch to pick up a check to pay her bills. The last person to see her was the security guard at the mall, who had seen Linda drive away from the parking lot. The young woman's family did not know why Linda left in the middle of her shift or, more importantly, where she was going, so the police were unable to find any additional information. The police started watching Robert while also issuing alerts for the young lady and her vehicle. Statistics show that husbands or Robert had a solid alibi. No other suspects were discovered, and according to everyone who knew Linda, she never had enemies and was generally a very positive person as investigators tried to find new leads. However, it was Robert's case. More men were more likely to commit crimes against their wives. It had been several days since Linda had vanished. On the third day, a report about an abandoned vehicle matching the description of the young woman's vehicle was given to the police. It was 20 kilometers from the shopping center in a suburban area. When the police arrived, they confirmed that the vehicle was Linda's. The car was parked next to some bushes on the side of the road. This region was largely undeveloped and covered in bushes and trees in the 1980s. The police discovered Christmas presents Linda had purchased prior to going missing inside the vehicle. The ignition key was present inside the salon, and the doors were not locked. An odd clue was also discovered by the police. A pack of empty menthol cigarettes was found next to the front passenger seat. Robert and Linda never smoked, so the pack might belong to the kidnapper, investigators concluded, which was the most obvious conclusion. The police started looking for evidence right away, and shortly thereafter they made a heartbreaking discovery about 40 meters from the car in the stream bed of a small creek. They discovered Linda's body. Her hands were bound together with an eyeglass and bikini cord. According to a relative of the victim, neither of these things were ever hers. Although the young woman was also subjected to violence, medical professionals determined that asphyxiation was the cause of death. However, at the time, couldn't get a DNA sample from the criminal, so the investigators presented what they believed to be an approximate timeline of events. When Linda went to load the gifts she had purchased into the car in a shopping center parking lot, an unidentified criminal attacked her. He made her take the wheel and drive to the location where her body was later discovered. After that, he killed her and brutalized her. The investigators decided to attempt an interview because there were no leads that could point them to a suspect. Naturally, attracting the attention of everyone who was in the shopping center during Linda's lunch break was a very difficult task. The victim's car was taken by the police, who then parked it in the mall while attaching a picture of the girl and information about her disappearance. The investigators hoped that the visitors would benefit from the visual installation. On that day, who saw Linda? Organized some information. The police were informed by numerous witnesses that they saw a young person in the mall with light hair. However, detectives were unable to place him. Other witnesses related a more intriguing story. They saw a man trying to hitch a ride on the highway the day Linda vanished, less than a kilometer from where the victim's body was discovered. The van driver soon informed the police that he had picked up a man who was hitchhiking on the same day and in the same area as other witnesses had seen him. It got interesting at this point. According to the driver, the man was since an empty pack of menthol cigarettes was discovered in the victim's car. The man was seen smoking menthol cigarettes while holding the entire pack in his hand. As soon as this was discovered, Forensic experts looked at the driver's van and discovered a fingerprint on the glass close to the passenger seat that did not resemble the owner's prints. Sadly, a comparison with current databases produced no findings. The driver's superficial description of the suspect did not match that of Prince, the owner, not assist in the man's capture by the police. The search for additional evidence came up empty, and the case's investigation was put on hold for several months. Not until 1985, when a prisoner in one of the state's prisons who was a police informant provided investigators with an intriguing tip, did a new lead come to light. Craig Andrew McConnell, who shared his cell with him, had told him that he had killed Linda Reed. Craig claims that Lyndon caught him and another man trying to steal a car from a shopping center's parking lot. The criminals kidnapped and killed her out of concern that she would recall their faces and call the police. The detectives were familiar with this name. Craig was a suspect in Linda's murder because he was serving 2 life sentences for killings that occurred in 1984, but the police were unable to establish a connection at the time. When they spoke to Craig in prison following the informant's tip, he insisted that he was not involved in the killing. He added that his cellmate made everything up and that they never spoke about it regarding the incident, but the police were slow to believe him. Just a few months after Linda's passing, Craig committed 2 heinous murders, so the informant's account may be accurate. The suspect's fingerprints did not match those on the van's glass when forensic experts compared them. The detectives decided to go to trial in 1986 despite this because they still thought Craig might be the murderer. The only evidence against him was an informant's claims, but he himself did not live to see the beginning of the trial. He passed away shortly before from an overdose of illegal drugs. However, the prosecution had his entire story. According to the informant Craig, who gave him a rough map of the location where he left Linda's body. Experts determined that the terrain was fairly accurately matched, right down to the location of the trees. Additionally, Craig claimed that Linda warned the kidnappers that Rob would seek retribution. The young woman actually did frequently chase after Rob. The informant that after Linda's car was discovered, he consumed a cheese and vegetable sandwich that belonged to her. Despite the fact that experts did discover cheese traces in her purse, all of this evidence was circumstantial and was not enough to support a conviction. Craig was exonerated of Linda's murder as a result. Was not enough to support a conviction. Craig was exonerated of Linda's murder as a result. Investigators tried to gather additional evidence that would enable them to obtain a guilty verdict because they still believe he was involved in the crime, but their other efforts came to a halt. When the murder investigation was reopened in 2014, 30 years after the original murder, the detectives decided to review the evidence. They gave samples of the fingerprints found on the van's glass to specialists who attempted to recreate them using cutting-edge technology. When they finally succeeded and entered the data into the database, the detectives discovered a match. Troy James O'Mara's fingerprints were found, and he was already serving a life sentence at the time Linda died. Year-old girl, and this crime's specifics were strikingly similar. When she got close to her car, his victim was coming from a store with purchases for her upcoming wedding. James coerced her to sit in the vehicle and then drove her to a remote location where he killed her after violently beating her and tying her hands. James was never considered a suspect in Linda's case and was not even on the police's radar despite this similarity. During the early stages of the investigation, the detectives remembered another fact. Several witnesses reported James, who was only 17 at the time, matched the description after seeing a fair-haired teenager in the mall's parking lot. Despite this, the police were determined to gather as much evidence as they could, and they were in for an interesting turn of events. Although it was no longer listed as evidence in the documents, it turned out that a DNA sample of the individual who had assaulted Linda had been kept at the warehouse during this time. It was almost by accident that the researchers found it. But there was one issue. The sample was local experts were unable to reconstruct the perpetrator's profile from the item because it was very small and had already started to deteriorate. The detective forwarded it to a cutting-edge lab in New Zealand, where the specialists were able to extract the profile and it perfectly matched James's DNA. Given that the criminal was already serving a life sentence, the investigation into all of this took the investigators several years. They could take their time and prepare the case for trial in the proper manner. Ultimately, James wasn't detained until August 26, 2018, nearly 35 years after the murder. The man was 51 years old at the time. He had spent more than half of his life behind bars and during that time had accrued additional charges. James managed to escape from prison once and even attacked security personnel twice, but he was apprehended the following day for the murder of Linda. Trial planning got underway after he admitted to being guilty. The process took a while, but in March 2021, the offender made the decision to confess. According to him, Linda was in the parking lot. The young lady was eating while seated in her vehicle. He offered her a sandwich before forcing her into her car and threatening to drive to a remote area where he would attack and kill her. James responded that his only goal that day was to murder a random young woman when the judge questioned him about his motivations. James was therefore given the option to apply for early release in July 2022 due to the fact that he had already served more than 30 years in prison. James was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of Linda. He is still serving his sentence as of right now, but he could be let go in the upcoming years. Sadly, Linda's father passed away before he could see the police catch her killer. After a protracted battle with cancer, he passed away despite having spent decades wanting to know what happened to his daughter. Robert promised Linda that he would never remarry after his wife passed away because he loved her so much. At the trial, following the announcement of the verdict, he thanked the investigators and said that James had permanently deprived him of his family. The circumstances surrounding Craig and the informant story are murky. Be aware that the informant was a seasoned criminal himself and would have benefited greatly from aiding in the investigation. He might have lied to the police, and all the pertinent information about the case could have been found in the newspapers. Share your opinion on this story in the comments and don't forget to like it. Thanks for watching.